Welcome, everyone. This is exciting.
All right, it looks like everybody is connected to audio, so we will go ahead and kick it off. Welcome everyone to the SCA US Chapter's Business Chats. This month's feature is addressing issues currently challenging the sustainability of the specialty coffee industry. My name is Grayson Caldwell. I am the head of sustainability at Bellwether Coffee. We are the makers of the first zero emissions electric coffee roaster. And I'm so excited to be moderating today. We have such an awesome lineup of panelists representing coffee origins across the globe. And I'm really excited about and looking forward to a really dynamic conversation today. So to kick it off, we're going to do a round robin of introductions of our panelists. So we have 6 panelists today. So I'm going to ask them each to briefly tell us a bit about who they are, where they work, and what their role is in the coffee supply chain. So Janine, since you're typically the host of these business chats, I'll get you to kick us off.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Grayson, and welcome everyone to this afternoon call. As Grayson said, my name is Janine Yonzima Royan. I am the owner of JNP Coffee, which is a company that specializes in coffee from Burundi, East Africa. So we produce, export and import coffee from Burundi all over the world. And I also happen to be on the SCA US chapter leadership team as a coordinator in focusing mainly on this business chat that I've been having about every other month. And as I was saying earlier to the panelists, we are always welcoming topics that we can discuss. So we have this call about every other month and they are recorded. So if you don't participate, you can always go back and actually check into them and listen to it. So the whole idea just about bringing some viable talk and topics for our community in coffee. So I think that's what I have.
Awesome. Alejandro, you want to go next?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Alejandro Cadena. I am the CEO of Caravela Coffee. We are a exporter-importing company based in Latin America. We have export operations in 7 countries in North America, and also import operations in the US, Australia, Taiwan, and Europe. So we work directly with over 4,000 coffee farmers in Latin America, trying to get their best coffees out to the best roasters out there in the world, paying good prices, sustainable prices, and making sure that everybody's winning. I'm excited to be here today and hope that we have a very productive conversation.
Thanks, Alejandro. Next, we'll go with Amanda.
Hey, everybody. My name is Amanda Eastwood. I am Director of Supply Chain Partnerships at West Rock Coffee Company. We're a roasting company based in the United States. I'm based in Lima, Peru, and my role is really integrated in the development and implementation of our responsible sourcing strategies, building out traceable, transparent supply chains, and really serving as an ambassador to both extremes of the supply chain. With my role at Origin, I am heavily involved in relationship with all of our key coffee suppliers and have big ears to hear their perspective on things, and the same thing for our consumer base, and communicating those things back and forth, doing our best to meet the needs of everybody in the supply chain. We're excited to be here with you today.
Thanks, Amanda. Jonia, you're next. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, sorry. Good morning from Timor-Leste, and thank you, everyone. It's really nice to be joining everyone here. So I'm working as a business development manager for a local social enterprise and specialty coffee exporter in Timor-Leste. So we organize our work with group of coffee producers, and we also export coffee into specialty coffee market in Japan, US, and Europe, and other countries in Asia and also Australia. So my role is also looking on way how we can create sustainable coffee business, and where we can support our farmers to promote the coffee overseas and continue to expand our market. So very glad to join everyone here today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonia. Ileana?
Thanks, Grayson. Hi to everyone. My name is Ileana Delgado. I am currently working at our family company in Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta out of the north in Colombia. But for the past 10 years, I've been involved in the coffee industry, trying to work to improve the livelihoods of coffee producers, at first from the Colombian Coffee Growers Federation and then from Asajar Coffee. And now from our family company, I hope to be able to get together with other initiatives locally to improve not only quality, but also livelihoods in Sierra Nevada. I'm excited to be here and talk about these interesting points we have today. Thanks.
Thanks, Ileana. And last but not least, we have Nelson.
Buenas tardes, everybody. Nice to meet you virtually. I'm Nelson Valverde. I'm the founder and CEO of Invalsa Coffee. We are I guess fully integrated. We start with the seed because we have coffee farms in Bolivia, and we also roast. And actually, we used to sell coffee in the cup when we have a coffee shop in Salem, Massachusetts, but we decided that we didn't want to work on weekends. By looking at the pictures, I see by the color of my hair that I'm probably not the youngest guy here. So I think the reason I got involved in coffee is because I kind of wanted to help preserve the quality of Bolivian coffee, which I'm originally from, which is actually very good, but very few people know about it because there's not that much production. But I also wanted to help the farmer, who in this chain, unfortunately, is the one that gets the shortest part of the cup. And so my idea is to work directly with them, pay them way above market prices, encourage them to improve their quality, and then pay them because of that. So I'm very happy to join this discussion, and I'll look forward to hearing from everybody.
Thanks, Nelson. And we have so many great panelists. I didn't read my list well enough. And Yuki, you're our final panelist for introduction. Sorry about that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Yuki Ebizawa, country representative of NGO Peace in Japan, Timor-Leste, and director of social enterprise named Cafe Brisa Serena. So me and Jonia are working together in Timor-Leste. Peace in Japan, NGO Peace in Japan has been working on to improve the quality of life of coffee farmers in Timor-Leste through specialty coffee production since 2003. We have been providing the farmers with technical assistances and agricultural materials to build the quality awareness and competency. Also, we purchase the coffee from smallholders and to export to US, Japan, Europe, and some Asian countries. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Yuki. Very excited to have all of these awesome panelists today to talk about sustainability in the coffee industry. And I would argue that on this panel, we're all acutely aware of the challenges that threaten the sustainability of the coffee industry. There's low prices, the impacts of climate change, migration, deforestation, plant diseases, the list goes on. So to kick us off, my first question for the panelists is looking at sustainability from the three pillars: social, environmental, and economic sustainability. What are the biggest challenges that you all see to the sustainability of the coffee industry? And this is going to be round robin, so feel free, whoever jumps in, and we can just kick it off from there.
Let me break the ice. I think the biggest problem to sustainability is the price of coffee. I think we cannot continue if we keep treating coffee as a commodity that's mass produced, and as a result, the price goes up and down based on weather patterns. I understand there is a space for really commercial coffee, and I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about specialty coffee, quality coffee. And I think it's important that people realize that, and I tell my customers all the time, you can pick good or you can pick cheap, but you can't pick both. You got to choose one or the other. And so the conversation is, I think we need to learn a little bit what our friends in the wine industry have done. You know, it baffles me that you go to a bar and somebody gives you I call it mediocre wine, and it's $12. You go to a coffee place and you give them the best coffee they ever tasted, and you save them $5, and they go, "What? This is coffee, isn't it?" I said, "Yes, and it's very good, and it's harder to make than wine," in case you didn't know. But I'd leave it at that. I think price is probably the biggest issue that in the specialty coffee we need to figure out. And they need to figure out a way to tell folks that, you know, making good coffee is not easy. And you should be able to treat it as that. I'll stop at that.
I wanted to add to what Nelson just said. The only thing that I would like to add is that even making less good or non-specialty coffee is still a challenge. The fact that commercial coffees are sometimes made by larger estates or by larger companies doesn't make it any less complicated in terms of environmental factors or agronomics or social activities in the country or political distress. So just to add that, and I was reading some information published today that I thought was very interesting for Colombia, and is that in the last generation, the size of a home in coffee producer areas for Colombia has been reduced by 38%. So that means that families are getting smaller. And the coffee population in Colombia has also decreased by 24%. That means that people are stepping out of coffee. And at the same time, the population that is remaining in coffee that is above 60 years old has increased in 120%. So these are changes from 1997 in our last census in Colombia to 2020. So I think that pricing, as mentioned by Nelson, combined with these social factors, are showing that, at least in Colombia, the largest threat is that people are looking for other options. You know, so there's less people that are willing to be able to grow coffee and continue their companies or their family initiatives. And also, as they get more educated, we're finding that, you know, coffee is not the only thing we can do with our land. We can do something else, whatever that is. So it's not only about just price, but the whole impact that price is going to have in the way that coffee is structured socially.
Ileana, those are really powerful stats. Thank you for adding those. And I want to add to what both you and Nelson have said. And I think I'm not going to dive into the climate change piece. I'll let somebody else do that because it's extremely important. But I think as it relates to price and farmers' ability to afford to remain in coffee business, I think we need to increase transparency along the supply chain. So where are the gray areas and how can we illuminate those to better understand what are the costs? What are people actually being paid along the supply chain? I'll leave that transparency piece there for a moment, but also communication and commitment. I think, you know, we prepped for this call, and I think one thing that came up was, hey, when the going gets rough, does the roaster still show up? And does the roaster do their best to commit to doing long-term relationships with producing organizations or directly with farmers? I've spent a lot of time on the ground with many different farmers, and when I've asked them what the greatest challenges are, they say, you know, if we could really, if we knew that we were going to have a long-term relationship with a roaster or with an importer, and also if we knew that we were going to pay enough to put beans on the table year on year, that would make a huge difference. So those three words I'm going to throw out there: transparency along the supply chain. So people being open and willing to open up their books, open up their costs, and talk about what does it really cost? What am I actually making? Is everybody covering their costs and actually making a profit? Is this a profitable business for everybody? If it's not really business. That communication, that showing up, even when the going gets rough, and talking about the difficult realities that we're facing, and being willing to work on solutions together along the supply chain. And yeah, commitment to showing up, but commitment to long-term relationships within your supply chain partnerships.
I think that everything that everybody has said is great. I think to me, prices is an issue, climate change is an issue. There's generational changes are huge issues. Cost of production are huge issues in the coffee world. But I think it all comes down to the long-term vision of the industry. I think when I started in this business 20 years ago, I think there was a long-term vision of really making sure that we were all winning. I don't see that vision anymore in most of the coffee buyers out there. It's become a more short-term vision. I need to make ends meet, and that also translates to the farmer. They're just trying to make ends meet, and there's no really long-term vision. One thing that we've tried to do at Caravela is to foster long-term relationships, and for the most part, we have built those long-term relationships, but they're not translated into the price, unfortunately. So what happens is we have buyers saying that they have long-term relationships, buyers that are willing to come and visit those farmers every year, but we don't have buyers that are willing to commit to 3 or 5 year contracts with fixed prices for farmers that allow them to invest in their farms and to feel security. I think Amanda, you mentioned that they want those longer-term relationships, but they also want the commitment, and the commitment is actually with the price that they're willing to pay. And we have 500 buyers around the world, and we only have a handful of roasters that actually commit to 3 or 5 year contracts. We have roasters that have been buying coffees from farmers for 15 years, and yet every year it's a negotiation of prices, and that doesn't help. That doesn't help the farmer, because every year it's a different story, and so every year there's a different price. And only if we can get farmers and roasters to sit on the table and say, okay, I want a long-term relationship, but I'm willing to commit to a long-term price as well. Unless we get to that point where there's 3 or 5 year contracts at fixed prices, it will be subject to what happens in the market, what happens with the weather, what happens with prices of other goods. And so the farmer will always be speculating, and the roasters will always be speculating, and that doesn't help the industry. We need to have a long-term vision and a long-term commitment with prices, long-term prices, so that we can actually build a sustainable industry.
Thank you, Alejandro, and all of you who came ahead of me here in your point of view and also participation in the call here. But this is very interesting, because actually when I call this chat, with the idea about what are the things are facing and challenging the sustainability of the specialty coffee industry, I came kind of from a different point of view. I did not know we were going to actually dive into the price. So actually my thought was, okay, what else are people having as challenges around the world, because most of the great coffee are coming mostly from developing countries. And I was just thinking more things like social, environmental, political, and so forth, that always seem to be changing, and especially like very dynamics, especially like in a place where I come from, like Burundi. It always seems like there is always something different every year. So you're dealing with a different challenge. So almost kind of you feel like you cannot even have a plan, because once you think you actually have figured out certain things, like in our case, we've been working so hard to sustain the farmers. We've been working so hard to just bring as much as possible, not only pay a good price, but bringing like additional support, like financial literacy programs and so forth, to be able to really bring additional other things they can do. But it always seems like there's something else that's just keep being thrown to you, and you're always constantly just like chasing, and almost like you're chasing problems you're trying to solve. So it's interesting that we kind of like go back to price, but I think that the reason that price still is extremely important is because most of the place that we deal with, we get the coffee from, are developing countries. And then when you don't have the economics in place, you cannot do other things. In other words, it's almost like, when you have money, you can actually take care of environmental issues. You can actually address social issues. But when you're still dealing with the same basic, challenge of pricing, it's very hard to kind of do any other stuff. And I think like in places like Burundi, you kind of talk about sustainability, about pricing. Like this year, for example, the harvest is like very, very small. So, I mean, when people cannot even just like get enough, coffee to start with, like when you have like small countries that have like limited, resources and limited capacity of production, and then you run into like a short harvest, it's even harder for the farmers. So to kind of come back and actually tell the roasters who are buying the coffee and say, this is what's going on. You can't keep coming back and asking for discount, because right now, last year, if you had 200,000 bags, this year we're going to have like a third of that. Well, then what do? If you're not paying enough for the farmers, guess what? They're going to take those coffees away and then plant something else. So like in place like Burundi, just a very good example, like the price of, kilo of cherries, it's 700, Burundi francs. Well, guess what? They can, sell, beans and rice for 1,200, francs, and they're better just like go plant, rice or plant, beans instead of just like actually coffee. So there's all these issues that seem to be dynamics. And I think this is interesting and good for us to kind of like discussing this with our community so they can be continuously aware of the challenges that we are always facing in different countries in different parts of the world. So I'll let others chime in.
Janine, with what you're saying, and like I don't want to be the data nerd here, but I did read something that was also very interesting, and is that by the end of the 19th century, even having 0.25 hectares of coffee planted in Colombia was a very profitable business. And you can see that in the increase of coffee production and cultivation in Colombia all the way to the 1930s, 1940s, where coffee, as Amanda said, was great business. And I think that you can relate that to the price in Colombia at the time because of the way that we were structured and organized and all of the other worldwide initiatives. But at the same time, the cost of production has changed. The cost of living everywhere in the world has also changed. The way that coffee is one of our important financial markets because we are in the SCA US chapter. But what about all of the other financial markets that are right now directing the way that all of our communities are living? And of course, I'll mention the political unrest in Colombia that is threatening not only what we are doing, but also it's a huge moment for all of us to decide what we want to do. These are the times that make us decide if we are going to invest in the upkeeping and the maintenance of coffee before the harvest, for those of us who haven't started harvest yet. But then some of the people are also choosing if they are going to pick coffee or not pick coffee, if they're going to process longer or shorter, if they're going to do specialty or commercial, if they're going to sell nationally or comply with their commitments abroad. I think that unfortunately we do go back to price because I don't know where in the world we do not need this capitalistic approach to what we used to do for living. So I think it's interesting how everything's changing too.
My comment isn't going to reinvent the wheel, but I think it is really important as well to acknowledge that farmers need to be armed with information, with education, so that they can, farmers generally know what they need and what they want, but with information, maybe specific information about their farm, or I see a question come up here about what is a fair price. And it's like, okay, so I think most business owners have a budget. They understand what the different costs that they have are. They understand what they're spending, what they're making. And again, I recognize that this isn't new, but I think it's important to acknowledge that farmers also need the information to run their business, their farm as a business. So they know what's coming in, so they know what's going out, so they know if it is a profitable business option for them, or if maybe coffee farming isn't the best option. That's not a popular thing to say, but coffee farming might not be the best option or the best only option for some farmers. So I think information continues to be power, and making sure that folks along the supply chain are armed with the facts to make good decisions for their household or for their business is really important.
Jonia and Yuki would love to hear what's going on in Timor-Leste and challenges y'all are facing.
Sure, thanks. Thank you for Timor-Leste. Actually, we are kind of new into specialty coffee, and we're also still like a new coffee origin, although we've been growing coffee for more than 500 years. But in the past, we've mostly we export coffee as a commodity product. So when we start to produce a specialty coffee, there's also a challenge with when we work with farmers, because it's like something from them. They have to put so much effort into every process just to have this good quality coffee that everyone wants. And although we've been trying to offer a better price in this country to our farmers, but still every time we visit the farmers, we still hear like them talking about, share concern about the price, that they're still hoping that they can get like better increased price for the coffee that they produce, considering the effort. And for them, sometimes they feel like, okay, they're producing the coffee is just to make to sustain their living, and still somehow not enough for them, because most of the farmers here is like smallholder farmers who own a small piece of land. And there's also a challenge with us here, because we're also struggling with aging coffee trees. But there's also an effort that's been doing by the government on all coffee stakeholders to address this challenge. And also there's also a challenge with, although Timor-Leste, we have large youth population, but there's also declining youth participation in the coffee farming. So every time we visit our farm, mostly we get to see more like older people. And this is also a challenge if we want to continue. So we also need to think how we can engage more youth and also invest more in youth, so they can learn more how to continue about the skills. So we need to help to transfer the skills about how to produce quality coffee to young people. But this is also the challenge with the price, because many still find that the price is not attractive. So they think it's better for them to move to the city where they can get better opportunity. So there's a bit of challenge that we hope that we can address as well. And we hope we can engage more youth as well. Yep, maybe I can pass to Yuki.
Well, so Jenny almost everything explained everything, but well, about the price, Timor-Leste is kind of unique, I think, because the beginning of the harvest, the biggest company announced to whole country, like purchase price of this year is how many cents per kilo. Then other company also follow that price. Even specialty coffee or commodity coffee, the mainly big companies buy or coffee cherry, they produce by themselves. So many coffee farmers cannot any good benefit from the specialty coffee production. It's the biggest challenge here.
Thanks, Yuki. So we have time for one or two more thoughts about challenges that are affecting or threatening the coffee industry. If any of the panelists want to jump in there before we move on to the next question.
I just want to add, one thing that's happened in the last years is that, every time coffee buyers come, they want something else. They want, they want growers to do one more thing. I still remember 15 years ago, if a farmer would do Rainforest Alliance, would get a Rainforest Alliance certified, there would be a 10-cent premium. Today, that premium is virtually nothing. Why? Because there's too much supply of Rainforest Alliance coffee out there. The next time it was, you need to do this in your farm. You need to do this other thing. You need to give me more transparency. You need to give me more and more and more things. Like buyers constantly are asking for more and more things. Even photographs, send me photographs, send me more information, things like that. But it hasn't come with a substantial increase in the price. So buyers expect more bells and whistles from their coffee, but they're not willing to pay more for the coffee that they're buying. And frankly, what's happening is that you now see buyers wanting the competition coffee, and they're willing to pay 20, 30 times the market price for those coffees, but they buy half a bag or one bag of coffee. But then when you ask them, are you going to buy the rest? They're 86, they're 85 pound coffee, and they say, no, I want to buy just the 83, the 84 pound coffee, and I want to pay less. So instead of paying more for coffee, what we're seeing now it's buyers paying less for coffee, but demanding more from the farmers. So and that's not sustainable. That's the problem, that we want more from the farmer, but we're not willing to pay more to the farmer. And I know that there are challenges everywhere. Labor costs are going up, rents were going up. I know there's lots of challenges, but you have to remember that the farmer is the weakest link in the supply chain. And if the farmer doesn't get a good enough price, a price that is above cost of production, we won't be having great coffee in the next 20 or 30 years. Ileana mentioned it. The farmers are not looking forward to having their kids be farmers. You see a lot of coffee growers that tell the children, you should go to the city and find other opportunities, instead of telling their sons and daughters to stay in the farm. And they don't do that because they don't see it as a sustainable business. They want a better future for their children, and unfortunately, they don't see that the farm is the future of those children. So we need to change the way that the industry really behaves. And as I said before, we need a long-term vision where we really, we say that we're doing this stuff, but we're actually not actually willing to pay a fair price or a sustainable price to the farmers. That needs to change for things to change. And if we pay the farmers better, if we commit to them for a long term, then we will be able to change the structure and the sustainability of the industry, and we'll be able to have great coffee for many years to come.
Thanks. Go ahead, Amanda.
Sorry. No, I just think we'd be remiss not to. I just want to splatter on the radar, on the canvas, the issue of climate change. Again, I know we're all aware of it, but I think I'll only speak for the United States. I don't think we feel some of the effects of climate change as acutely. In the States, you go to the grocery store and you find polished fruits and vegetables always on the rack. You may pay a little bit more for them if they're out of season or something like that. But in many countries of origin, you're waiting for the rain. The rain came late. It's too much rain. You're getting reports of harvests that are running late, or they're coming early, or the flowers fell off the tree because untimely rain, not enough rain, etc. You go to the marketplace and you can't find the fruits and vegetables you're looking for the same reason. And water sources dry up when they're not meant to dry up. Lower growing coffee regions become less and less viable year on year. There's less viable coffee producing land available. And I just feel that it's important that I throw that out there and say farmers feel it very acutely. And it's just, I feel the importance of making sure that we acknowledge that in this conversation.
I agree with you, Amanda, and because of that is that I will reemphasize the fact that while we are focusing on specialty coffee, producing coffee in general is highly complicated, and even commercial coffees are being produced by smallholders and being bought by extremely large holders of other kind of companies. So I've always flagged in this kind of event with the SCA, where we are always talking about specialty coffee, and I appreciate it and I think it's valuable. But I think that we should not forget that more than 80% of the coffee in the world is still commercial coffee and is also produced by smallholders. So the fact that the price for specialty coffee is not good enough right now doesn't make the price for commercial coffee good enough either. The amount of companies or producers that are producing commercial coffees that have proper cost of production to price of sale is not that big. It's not enough. Like if we were only keeping those companies with those relationships that probably do have contracts, they wouldn't be able to supply the needs of the demand for that kind of coffees either. So we also should be a little bit more realistic that while the C market is a standard, like for example, the minimum wage or the minimum income in other cases, it's still just a reference that doesn't represent, currently it doesn't represent roasters or importers that are not entirely happy with the increase in price, and it doesn't represent producers or exporters or traders when coffees are low either. So I think it's also important that whenever we talk about coffee, we keep in mind everything that we just discussed environmentally, because yes, we are the SCA, but we are also coffee, and we are a large population needing a little bit more order too.
I'm out to add on to Liana's point of view here. I think, you got to diversify. There's no question. I think diversification of like clients as well as, if you just, like you said, or small producer who are producing specialty coffee, they're also producing high-end coffee. So you got to find market for that. You have to also you have to diversify, what you talk about, climate change, Amanda. I think that's one of the things that we always try to encourage with, smallholder, like in places like Burundi, they got to do other things. So you can't only just like rely on the income that's going to be coming from coffee. However, the cash crop, which is the coffee, has to be able to provide a good price so they can actually be able to do other things. So like in our case, we're always trying to say, okay, how else can we support them? So when we actually give them like extra money, like the premium that we pay for high quality coffee, they can go out there and actually start other enterprises that can actually be sustainable to their livelihood. So they are not just like only relying on the coffee as a way of living. But if you don't start with just that coffee, which is like a cash crop for most places, you're paying a good price for it, they can't go and do other things. They can't, send kids to school. They can't pay for that extra, procedure that, a child or father or and any other household might need, or be able to actually just be able to, plant bananas or other things they can sell. So any ways that we can just figure out a way to really make this sustainable, I think it'll be just really amazing. I'm still just blown away from even the fact that, when I talk about small country like Burundi, which is one of the poorest countries in the world, very small, size of Maryland, only produce 200,000 bags a year on a good production year, still cannot sell all that coffee in the world. So when we even talk about pricing, this is exactly what happens. If they cannot move in all the coffee, well, guess what's going to happen?
Thanks, everybody. I want to make sure that we have time to move to the second question. So I think all the panelists did a great job of like painting the picture of really the challenges that threaten the sustainability of the coffee industry. I heard themes of environmental factors, declining population working in coffee, lack of long-term contracts, lack of access to information to producers, and there was a lot of talk around low prices as well being unsustainable. But I really want to flip those challenges on its head and, looking at the panelists and all of the people who are in the room who represent different parts of the coffee supply chain, and hear from the panelists what the coffee industry can do to not only reduce our environmental impact, to really ensure the economic and social well-being of the coffee supply chain. So interventions that the coffee industry can do so that everybody can walk away and have action steps of how they can help increase the sustainability of the coffee industry. And then I want to save the last 15 minutes to open it up to the audience for Q&A. So everyone wants to kick us off there.
I would say education. That's just me. I just always believe that education is gold. Education is everything. I mean, I will always start by saying, if I was not educated, I won't be here talking to all of you, because I come from one of the poorest countries in the world. But also educating the consumer is extremely important. And I just don't know. I think that Nelson had mentioned earlier the fact that how it's so difficult to produce coffee, but yet a glass of wine is still more expensive than a cup of coffee. So that education to actually be able to just not only drive it to the roasters, but also to the consumer is extremely important in my point of view. So how do we actually get to influence our neighbors to actually do understand that actually producing coffee is hard, is difficult, and also they need to be paying more money for that. I think that constant education about what it takes to actually bring that coffee to them is extremely important.
I think I would add one thing about, you want to reduce the environmental impact, but in order to do that, we all have to chip in. It's not just the farmer who needs to do their stuff on the ground. We all have to help that farmer, and we all have to do our part. And I think if I were to say something that really needs to be done in the industry is to reduce the risk and the volatility that farmers face. if we don't reduce that risk and that volatility, there's no way that farmer will do anything to improve the sustainability and environmental sustainability of coffee. If that farmer doesn't have clear incentives and reduced risks, then that farmer will not be able to do anything to reduce the environmental problems that we have. If that farmer is not paid well, he or she will have to go and tear down trees to burn fuel and to feed their family. If that family doesn't have the certainty that their coffee will be purchased at a good price before, they will not be able to invest in their farms, and that investment includes improving their water treatment facilities or using better fertilizers in their farms to actually reduce the climate change impacts that the farm could produce in the environment. So there needs to be a focus on really thinking about how to reduce the risk and the volatility that farmers face, for that farmer to be able to invest in sustainable production techniques that will help us survive as a humanity.
I agree with Janine and I agree with Alejandro. Definitely, I do think that there's something that is a bit more actionable on a one-person basis, and it's the very unpopular conversation of, do roasters really need to travel to every origin every time? And I'm a huge traveler, so I'm not going to give an opinion or say anything, but what I do think is that when we talk about transparency, it's not only about opening our books, but it is also about being honest as to, why am I traveling? Am I traveling because I don't trust you and I want to see that the coffee that you're saying that you're picking is actually what you're picking? Or am I traveling because I am working with an importer, exporter that I do not trust and I want to hear from that producer that they are actually being treated well? Or do I want to go on vacation and I love coffee and I love my coffee friends and I want to do that, and that's fair too. So I'm not talking about judgment here, but I do think that transparency is so much more than just accounting and bookkeeping and margins and stuff. It's about really about why is it that we are in such a close relationship, but also that we have to monitor so closely. Like, if I don't go every year, and I'll give this as an example, my father has been selling coffee to the same client in 20 years, and this company has visited 3 times. And I think that that's the result of trust. That's the result of just being able to tell the other person that you are having a relationship with, in this case, a business relationship. You do you, I do me, and I trust that we are both going to do what's best for each other and for our relationship. Then in other companies that I've been, I'm traveling with a buyer that buys 10 bags every year and has to supervise that everything is perfect. And again, I'm not trying to impose judgment. I'm just trying to reflect that transparency and honesty is just much more than numbers. So we can also consider that for something that we can do, because of course, as a person, I cannot change the coffee industry, and I cannot change price right away, or the C market, or wages, or whatever. But as a person in the coffee industry, I can choose to trust and try to make also that relationship work a little bit better.
That feeds really well into what I'm thinking over here, which is we need to ask hard questions. We need to get comfortable getting uncomfortable, and recognizing that we probably are, if we're asking tough questions, we might find some tough answers, because as we're discussing here, there are some things that are broken. There are some things that are not working. So we need to talk about them. We need to engage in more transparent, more authentic relationships with our supply chain partners. We get busy. Our to-do list is long, and like I already mentioned, we may not like what we might find, so maybe it's easier sometimes not to ask those questions. But I think wherever you sit on the supply chain, if you're a barista and you're facing the consumer, and instead of just talking about the tasting notes and maybe the name of the farmer, maybe understanding a little bit more about the profitability, the costs along the supply chain, and communicating little bits and pieces, figuring out what consumers are, what threshold do they have for information, slowly changing that culture around what's communicated to the consumer. Or if you are the buyer for a small roastery, a large roastery, whatever your role is, it's transcending the supply chain, asking about costs, asking about challenges that your importer, your exporter, the farmers are facing. But knowing that once you have that information, are you going to be accountable to working with your partners to solve any of that? I do find, and again, this might not sound popular either, that there are trendy topics, there's buzzwords over the last 10, 15 years in sustainability. And for a few years, it's, we're talking about climate change or profitability or farm workers. And then suddenly we shift to another topic, but have we actually demonstrated that we've made an impact on the topic that was so sexy for 5.5 years? I think that we need to we have the tough conversations, seek solutions together, be realistic about goals and objectives that we can actually achieve together, not overcommit, and then see those commitments through. I think that's going to also build the trust that you're talking about, Ileana, is when I actually see that there's results on these commitments that we're making. It's going to enhance the assurance of the topics going on with your coffee, whether that's risks related to social, environmental, things that you might be going to check out. But I'll pause there. I think I'm making my point. We need to ask the tough questions, be willing to find unsavory answers, not reject our supply chain partners when that happens, but rather work together towards solutions and see those solutions through.
Let me jump in here. I think we're very good at talking the talk, but not so much as walking the walk. And I think it's important that we are the ones that are educated. We're the ones that have the MBAs. We're the ones that do all those things. And we assume that the farmers, have all those skills and they should be able to do it. They don't. And I think it's our responsibility to be able to do for them what they cannot do themselves. So in order to perhaps make it a little more optimistic, I'm going to share what we do in Bolivia. And I don't know if this applies everywhere, but that's what we do. We're interested in specialty coffee, and we buy coffee at a base price. We don't pay less than $2.35. Okay, that's the price. Everybody brings a cup. We try to work. We have multi-year contracts with different farmers, and if sometimes they bring coffee that's below that, we take it and we say you need to improve, and if not, maybe you're in the wrong business. We also don't pay the same to everybody. We have a posted cupping score. This is how much we pay, and then at the end of the year, we'd say, okay, this is how much coffee we bought, this is how much we paid, and this is how much each person got. So when they said, gee, how come my neighbor got paid more than I did? Well, because his coffee is better. And this is what you can do to make it better. And I think that's the part that, that's our contribution to be able to make this sustainable. What is a fair price? A fair price is when a person can make a living of it and doesn't have to find an alternative to it. So if you can make the national minimum wage growing coffee or more, then you're okay. And I think that's the model we're trying to do. I also want to go back to Janine's point about education. And I think, where we educate the farmer, we educate, but we also need to educate the consumer. Every year we do in Massachusetts, there's a famous farmers fair, it's called the Topsfield Fair. We have a coffee booth and we serve our coffee there. And I want to share this experience because I think it's telling. One lady came around to me and they said, how come your coffee is so much more expensive than Dunkin' Donuts? And I looked at the lady and I said, with all due respect, ma'am, if you can't tell the difference, don't waste your money, go buy the other stuff. And my wife was there. She kind of tucked my shoe and was like, oh, you treat customers like that. And I said, and she said, you were right. This is a lot better. I said, and that's why it costs more money. And I think that's what we can do to educate the person to say, okay, you can't just, think that everything is, you got my point. And I think what we need to do is to us walk the walk and do those things and realize that we have some competitive advantage and use that competitive advantage to help the one that doesn't. And at the end, we'll all be happy. Thank you.
Awesome. So we have a 10 minutes left, so I want to open it up to Q&A, and then also panelists feel free to keep jumping in on these. But I haven't seen Amanda look like she covered the first question that was around who decides what a fair price for coffee at each origin is. I don't know if any other panelists want to jump in on that, but also if people just want to turn on their cameras, open up their mics, feel free to just ask questions directly to the panelists as well.
Grace, and I did want to mention there that again, circling back to trust, that there's multiple exporters, importers, some roasters that have their initiatives to also discuss price, like somebody mentioned in the chat about Caravella. There's also other roasters in the US trying to show their transparency. I think that I don't think that we're ever going to be able to find one fair price or one right price or good price or whatever that can be. But I do think that there's many more tools right now for us to have more information. There's a transaction guide as well that we can read just to try to build ourselves on more information to be able to find with our partner, whatever the importer or the exporter or the producer itself, how can we reach that price without generalizing and putting in the same basket the cost of production or needs for Colombia, Bolivia, Burundi, and Timor-Leste, but where am I sourcing from and what makes sense for the people who am I sourcing from as well? Sourcing from a smallholder in Colombia is not the same thing than a smallholder elsewhere or a medium holder. So I would also invite people to read into all of those resources that are now available for us to learn, and build our own criteria.
Okay, can I also? Yep.
Go ahead, Jonia.
Thank you. Yep. When we talk about trust and transparency, this is also something that I look at. I think very important when we build a relationship from farmers up to importer and actors in the coffee value chain. I think it's very important to have the trust. And also with our farmers, sometimes their lack of information when they're questioned about the price. Sometimes it's also very important for us to transfer the information and share the information, and especially about the coffee price and other information that they might need to know. So, and build the trust from farmers and also other coffee in the value chains as well. And also part of this transparency also when we talk about addressing climate change, like for Timor-Leste, we like the majority of coffee is still like grown organic in the forest, and by default because there's issue like maybe story in the past as well that I also with the challenge with the poverty that where people cannot afford to buy like purchase like fertilizer, so it's like still grown organic. So what we're trying to do here is like to encourage farmers to continue with the practice that they've been with what we already have by investing more in organic farming, and also invest in some training by bringing people to help with doing training for coffee agroforestry, so they can understand. So they're not just helping not just to focus on producing coffee, but also work together how we can also protect the environment and conserve our environment, so that we can continue to produce like healthy coffee trees and continue to produce coffee. So at least this is just, I want to share a little bit about what we've been doing as well in Timor-Leste. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonia. I'm going to read out a question that we got in the chat. If minimum wage in coffee producing countries is anything like it is in the United States, why aren't we aiming for an actual living wage?
Well, because somebody has to pay the price. Yeah, sure. I think it's easy to say everybody should make a living wage, but at the end, if you want to balance your books, somebody has to come up with the funds to pay for it. I like minimums. If you pay more than that, yeah, all the power to you.
I'd like to chip in on that concept of living wage or living income for farmers. I think it's a great concept, especially the living wage. If you have an employee, living wage works really well. In terms of coffee, I think living income is a very difficult concept because the income of a farmer will depend a lot on their productivity, their farm's productivity. And so you see some farmers that have 5 bags per hectare productivity, while others might have 30 bags per hectare productivity. And of course, their income will depend on how much coffee they produce, but also on how much hectares or land they have on coffee. So it's a very complicated concept in terms of especially for coffee farming, because if you're a bigger farmer with higher productivity, you will need a lower price to get to that living income. If you're a smaller farmer with very little productivity and very tiny farm size, you would need a much higher price to give you that living income. Yeah, so it's a complicated concept. I put in the chat a work we did a couple of years ago showing the differences in prices that you'd have to pay farmers based on productivity and farm size, and it's huge. For a farmer that is highly productive, a $2 per pound price and has 3 hectares, a $2 per pound price would make them and would produce them a $5,000 income. But for a farmer that has 1 hectare and only 5 bags, you need to pay that farmer $8 per pound. So it's a huge difference in price that depending on the productivity of the farmer and the farm size of the farmer. And so when you tell a roaster, you need to pay $8 a pound for this coffee, he's going to say, I can't pay that price, and there lies the pickle. The real complicated question is, what should I pay this farmer? What should I pay this other farmer? And of course, for this to work, the only alternative would be to subsidize the farmers that are not productive, but that also poses the challenges that you don't want to create, the wrong incentives either. By subsidizing inefficient farmers or smaller farmers. So it's a very complex situation. And I think Amanda mentioned this, maybe some farmers might need to think again if they should be coffee farmers. That's a critical issue, that a question that we have to ask ourselves. Will all farmers be able to survive, and will we be able to help every single farmer out there to be sustainable? Or we might have to, find other alternative crops for those farmers that might not be able to be sustainable or profitable enough. It's a tough question, but that's a question that sometimes we'll need to get into answer that question.
Unfortunately, we are at the top of the hour. I know we could all keep talking about this for hours, but as Janine mentioned earlier, feel free to reach out to us with other topics that you want to talk about in these SCA business chats. And we look forward to seeing you next time. And thank you so much to all the panelists for such a dynamic conversation today. And we will see you all at the next one.
And Grayson, as Grayson said, please put in your request for maybe new discussion. This was a very big topic for a very short period of time. So if any need for expanding on this topic, please feel free to reach out at SCA's Specialty Coffee Association. They will communicate with us, and then we can continuously bring forward some very interesting and dynamic discussion and solution to our industry. So thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.